China's blockade in the South China Sea has forced the Philippine Coast Guard vessel Teresa Magbanua to retreat from Sabina Shoal. With Filipino sailors reportedly struggling with dehydration and malnutrition, Manila was left with no choice. So what's next? Will the United States intervene? And if so, how will China react? Hello and welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Unman Bhattacharya. Let's connect the dots of the increasingly volatile situation in the South China Sea. China has been bullying the Philippines in the South China Sea. There have been several incidents in the past few months where the Chinese Coast Guard rammed into Philippines Navy vessels and damaged them. The Chinese seized weapons, hurled water cannons, and blocked resupply missions to the Filipino sailors. Even Filipino fishermen boats were not spared. In June this year, a Filipino sailor lost his finger in a Chinese attack. Now, after all these desperate and aggressive actions, it seems that China suddenly is feeling scared. But why? The answer lies in the Typhon missile system. This is a mid-range missile system deployed by the United States in the Philippines. Now imagine a weapon that can hit targets over hundreds of miles away with pinpoint accuracy. The Typhon missile system is just like that. It is a powerhouse that can fire multiple missiles at once, destroying enemy ships, buildings and infrastructure. It can launch missiles including SM-6 missiles and Tomahawks with a range exceeding 1,600 kilometers. The missile system was brought in during the US-Philippines joint military exercise in April this year. Though it was brought temporarily for the exercise, now the United States has no immediate plans to withdraw. Instead, the US is testing the feasibility of using the system in a regional conflict. And this has threatened China. Listen to what a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has to say.
China is gravely concerned about relevant reports with regard to the deployment of the mid-range missile system in Philippines by United States of America. China has repeatedly and sternly stated its opposition. The practice is a serious reversal of history, poses a serious threat to the security of countries in the region, and aggravates geopolitical confrontation.
Let's understand the location where the Typhon system has been placed. It is stationed on the northern Philippine island of Luzon, facing the South China Sea, and is close to the Taiwan Strait. So China fears that this missile system can be used to attack it. This is the first time that a mid-range missile system has been stationed in the Indo-Pacific since a 1987 US-Soviet treaty prohibited such deployments. This move has sparked strong reactions from China and Russia, who accuse Washington of fueling an arms race in the Indo-Pacific. The Philippines' strategic location makes it an indispensable partner for the United States in the region. It serves as a vital staging point for potential military aid to Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. To counter China's dominance in the region, the US has been rapidly accumulating anti-ship weapons in Asia. Washington is rapidly deploying military assets in Guam and partnering with Japan to deploy medium to long-range land-based weapon systems. Beijing has a significant lead in the Indo-Pacific missile race, with militarized islands in the South China Sea armed with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missiles. China has taken its South China Sea claims to the next level, transforming at least 3 artificial islands into fortified military bases. Despite a 2016 international ruling favoring the Philippines, China has built and militarized islands in disputed waters. It has deployed anti-ship and anti-aircraft missiles, defying international law and regional concerns. The Typhon missile system has redrawn the regional map. As the stakes rise, one question remains: will diplomacy prevail, or will the South China Sea become the next global flashpoint? A police training academy attacked. An international airport stormed. And a presidential jet set on fire. All recent terror attacks in Bamako, the capital of Mali, a country in West Africa. Weeks before those attacks, these scenes had emerged from neighboring Burkina Faso. Armed gunmen riding motorcycles and on a shooting spree, with bodies strewn on ground. Dozens were killed in these attacks. So what should one make of the security situation in West Africa? Well, many terrorist organizations operate in West Africa. Among the prominent ones are Boko Haram. Originating in Nigeria, Boko Haram has expanded its operations to neighboring countries including Chad, Cameroon and Niger. Another one is Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. Active in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, AQIM seeks to impose strict Islamic law. And there is also Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, or ISGS. Operating in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, ISGS has pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. So why has West Africa become a hotspot of terrorism? Many factors are contributing to terrorism here. One of them is poverty and economic instability. Economic disparities and lack of opportunities create a fertile ground for extremist ideologies. Another factor is weak governance. Ineffective institutions and porous borders enable terrorist groups to operate freely. Countries such as Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso have suffered from successive weak governments characterized by corruption, impunity and disorganization. The elites have failed to provide security for vast sections of the population. Jihadist insurgencies thrive in such a vacuum. Ethnic and religious tensions contribute to terrorism too. Long-standing conflicts between ethnic and religious groups provide a breeding ground for extremism. External influences play a role too, with global terrorist networks and foreign fighters exacerbating the situation. The colonial past of these countries share the blame too. Now meet this 20-year-old orphaned migrant sitting on a concrete bench scrolling through WhatsApp messages. While he is in Barcelona's Ciutat de la Park, his thoughts have wandered thousands of kilometers away to his village in Mali, where jihadists had upended his life.
I traveled for 2 years and I left because of the war.
Islamic militants killed his parents and his siblings were missing. Believing he was the last of his family, the young man packed his bags for a perilous 2-year journey that ultimately brought him to Spain, where he is now seeking asylum. Overshadowed by the wars in Ukraine, the Middle East and Sudan, conflict in the Sahel region of Africa rarely garners global headlines, but it is contributing to a sharp rise in migration from the region towards Europe at a time when anti-immigrant far-right parties are on the rise and some EU states are tightening their borders. According to the United Nations International Organization for Migration, or IOM, the route to Europe with the steepest rise in numbers this year is via West African coastal nations to Spain's Canary Islands. So while many like him have migrated or are desperate to migrate, the consequences of terrorism in West Africa have been devastating. Displacement, violence and human rights abuses have led to a severe humanitarian crisis. Terrorism has led to economic instability by disrupting trade, investment and economic growth. It also threatens regional stability with potential spillover effects into neighboring countries. That's because the swaths of territory under jihadist control risk becoming training grounds and launch pads for more attacks on major cities such as Bamako or on neighboring states and western targets in this region or beyond. But there has been an international response to this terrorism which has come in different forms, like regional cooperation. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, and the African Union have tried to fight terrorism. Military interventions have taken place too. International military interventions, such as the French-led Operation Barkhane, aim to degrade terrorist capabilities. Development assistance is coming in too. International organizations and countries provide development aid to address underlying economic and social issues. But there are challenges, like Western powers that previously invested in trying to beat back the jihadists have now very little capacity left on the ground. So what is needed now is sustained commitment, as long-term commitment can address root causes and support regional security efforts. Strengthening institutions and promoting good governance are essential too. Enhanced cooperation among West African countries is also vital to prevent terrorist groups from exploiting borders. So to sum it up, terrorism in West Africa poses a significant threat to regional stability and development, and addressing the root causes, strengthening regional cooperation and sustaining international support are critical to combating this menace. A comprehensive approach that balances security measures with development and governance reforms is needed to mitigate the threat of terrorism in West Africa. But the international community must also hear the voices of people affected by terrorism, violence and insurgency. Technology provides real opportunities to link those affected directly to policymakers, charities, government and society more widely. Solutions need to be as much African as they are international. Members of the National Guard, the Army and the police deployed on the streets. Choppers patrolling the city. The visuals you see are from Mexico's northwestern state of Sinaloa, where armed men are taking law into their hands. More than 100 people have been killed or missing. The Mexican military struggles to contain the violence. Daily life in Culiacan, the capital, has come to a standstill. Schools are shut, shops and businesses are impacted too. But what sparked this violence? It began with the arrest of 76-year-old Ismail Almayo Zambada, co-founder of the notorious Sinaloa Cartel. A godfather figure in the underworld, Almayo evaded capture for 35 years with a $15 million bounty on his head. El Mayo built the Sinaloa cartel alongside Joaquin El Chapo Guzman from the remnants of the Guadalajara cartel, which collapsed in 1989. But unlike El Chapo, who was twice jailed and escaped, Mayo remained elusive. But on 25th July, US authorities arrested him in El Paso, Texas. So how was he arrested? Ismael Al-Mayo Zambada's arrest was a masterful move orchestrated by none other than Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the son of his former partner El Chapo. In a clever sting operation, Guzman Lopez convinced Zambada he was heading to northern Mexico to scout out properties for clandestine airstrips. Little did Zambada know he was walking into a trap. Both Zambada and Guzman Lopez were taken into custody, leaving many wondering if a plea deal between Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo, and the US government is in the works. This arrest raises questions about Sinaloa cartel's future. Who will seize control? History repeats itself as rival factions clash, fighting for territory and dominance. But why is the US after these cartels? The reason is fentanyl, a highly potent synthetic opioid drug. Fentanyl overdoses are now the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. The Sinaloa cartel, led by notorious figures like Los Chapitos and El Mayo, has become the primary supplier of fentanyl to the US. Their vast network traffics drugs to over 50 countries worldwide, with fentanyl being a lucrative commodity due to its ease of production and transportation. Unlike cocaine, which requires large coca plantations in the Andes, fentanyl can be manufactured and distributed with relative ease. Now let's go back to the arrest. Zambada alleges that Joaquin Guzman Lopez kidnapped him and then flew him to the United States against his will. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who leaves office this September, has blamed the US for the violence in Sinaloa. Listen to what Obrador had to say.
And this demands an explanation, because if we are now confronting a situation of instability and confrontation in Sinaloa, it must be because they made that decision.
Meanwhile, the US has rejected the claim. This critical moment raises questions about the future of the US-Mexico relations and the ongoing battle against narcotics smuggling. The reality is, fentanyl smuggling is a lucrative business, and shutting it down entirely may be impossible. The cartels have ingrained themselves in Mexico's drug war landscape, making it a daunting task to eradicate them. While taking down key figures like El Mayo may not immediately halt drug trafficking, it's a substantial win for US law enforcement. Now, the burning question is, will cooperation between the United States and Mexico lead to meaningful change, or will cartels continue to thrive? One thing is for certain: El Mayo's arrest marks a crucial step towards dismantling organized crime. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munmun Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.